On this episode of AV Week, AVIXA has a brand new global economic report about the health of the AV industry. Vaddio has a brand new production switcher, and we look at education in the world of audiovisual. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 319, recorded Friday, October 6th, 2017. Wiggling Electrons.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box, and by SDVOE, the platform for networked AV.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Ted Albright. I am your host. With us to talk about various stories that we've gathered together. First up, my buddy, pal, left-hand side of my brain. It's been missing lately. His name is George Tucker. He works for a company called Aurora Multimedia. How are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. Makes me think of the quote, of all the things I've lost, I miss my mind the most.
I do. George has gotten a new job, and it's wonderful. Absolutely. Very happy for him. Very happy for Paul Harris. I just miss hanging out with George more. I'm just going to say it that way.
He's got me working a lot.
Yeah. But you're doing some cool stuff, and actually we're going to talk about some of that in a minute. Also with us is Justin Kennington, actually one of the smartest guys that I know. He works for SDV. I don't know a whole lot of people, though. SDVOE. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Tim. It's a warm, beautiful day here in Montreal, but winter is coming.
Winter is coming, brother. Yeah. We hit 95 in St. Louis last week, and the very next day it was like, 50 or 60 or something. So
we had a bit of that.
Yeah. Also with us, and he's going to be here just to talk about the first story. His name is Sean Wargo. He's the brand new Senior Director of Market Intelligence for AVIXA. How are you, sir?
Great, Tim. How are you doing today?
Good. And I feel like I need to say this probably for the next 6 months to a year. AVIXA is the new Infocom. Infocom changed their name to AVIXA. I am doing really, really well at not saying Infocom, but I do think I feel I need to clarify the fact that Infocom is now AVIXA. So when I say AVIXA, just insert Infocom for the next couple of months. All right. The story reason we have Sean on is because AVIXA released a global study here this past week. About it's an AV industry outlook and trend analysis, and a couple pieces I want to point out and ask Sean about. First is the fact that the sales overall revenue since 2014 in Europe, and again this is a global AV industry outlook, it fell a little bit. So Sean, in general, do we know why since 2014 revenue in Europe and probably specifically more in UK revenue has dropped since then?
Sure, Tim. So as we look at the forecast that, from 2014 to now, clearly in some parts of the world, we had a little bit more of a challenging economic environment. Certainly the vote for Brexit created some uncertainty. As we look forward, though, we really see some strength returning to that market. So you're going to see 3% compound annual growth for Europe and even more in some other areas. So we think we're out of the doldrums and coming into a period of much better growth for the industry overall.
So since you did the report, there was reduction, but you see coming out of that.
Absolutely, yeah. As we look even out to 2022, most of the regions under study were showing some pretty positive increases. Some pretty phenomenal ones. Europe is probably at the lower end of growth, but certainly coming out of what we saw in the past of those declines.
Another piece I want to hone on here, and this is not breaking news. Let's just be honest here. The fact that the display and projector market, and I find it interesting that you guys combine that, but that's neither here nor there. The display and projector market is dropping. Now, part of that is a 13% drop in projector sales. That's the not exactly news part. You guys mentioned the fact that that's being offset. The $1 billion loss is the number you use, $1 billion loss in projector. That's being offset by $3.5 billion in displays. Is that something you guys found just because of things like digital signage and the increase in the size of some of these displays and those offsetting projectors, or was there another mitigating factor?
No, you're right on there. I think that the biggest phenomenon that you see in the display market, now that prices have really come down substantially and things like LCD, LED-based displays, they're showing up in a lot more places. The form factor is larger, so they're able to replace projection in a lot of cases. So whether that's boardrooms or digital signage in retail, we're seeing it almost across the vertical markets that we studied, but absolutely a story of evolution of technology from projection kind of making way for, in some cases, the more efficient and effective and easier to implement LED-based technologies.
Another area that you guys hone on here are areas of growth. In other words, verticals that integrators and manufacturers both can look at as growth areas. Hospitality is nothing new. This is not, this is still a growing technology. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is the streaming technology and storage segment. What exactly did you guys find there, and how exactly did you get to streaming and storage media or media storage?
Yeah, to back away from that a sec, I think that's part of this broader trend we've all been talking around, Internet of Things, connectivity, et cetera. Okay. The ability to reach remote locations because now Wi-Fi really blankets everywhere. So that's creating this ability to stream a lot more content. You're seeing that play out in places like retail, where you've got now displays and the ability to remote manage content, stream it to those displays, update it on a regular basis. That's requiring a couple things. Certainly one is displays. The second is perhaps on-location media servers, storage devices, et cetera. So that's what you're seeing bundled into that number. And that really was the single largest product category that we were tracking, especially as you look out into the near term. SMSD was the specific category there, storage, media, and storage devices. So I'd say keep watching that. I think that's not a surprising trend, given we've been talking about connectivity for quite a while. And Internet of Things, all that sort of stuff just feeds into and provides a backdrop of that.
All right, last question here as we wrap up and get ready to ask these fine gentlemen what they think. Where did you come up with the numbers? And it's sort of a not. It's an honest question, but it's more of a less, more honestly, just you got a lot of information here. You have a lot of analytics. What was your base? What was your sample to get this information?
Great question. And honestly, these are those things that you cannot do without great partners. In this case, we enlisted the help of a firm called IHS Markit. They're out of London. They have vast experience and a wide array of resources available at their disposal, on the ground, boots on the ground sort of thing, where we can get, bottom up looks at various regions and markets and verticals. They track a lot of these underlying technology sectors as part of their normal day-to-day operations. So enlisting their help is really what makes it possible. We contract with them to help us essentially build this out, utilizing all that raw material and resources they have available. That's essentially it. Now, there's a lot that goes into that soup, whether it's end-of-year reports from a lot of the companies that are involved in these vertical markets, to even economics indicators and other data sources that they're looking on a regular basis. But their array of analysts is really what makes it possible.
All right, very good. Don't go anywhere. We're going to ask these guys some questions, and they may need your insight more than, well, they definitely need your insight more than mine. Mr. Tucker, I want to start with you on this from two sides. First of all, George is an educator. He teaches classes for CEDIA. He also works for a manufacturer. He's done a lot of stuff in general. What does this report tell us about the health of the AV industry, honestly? Not necessarily right now, because obviously it's a good snapshot, but does it give us maybe a trajectory of where we're going?
Well, I think it tells us that the evolution or the natural selection that's going on is actually real. That thing on the ground that we know, we've seen, less projectors, more displays, more intimate, more straightforward, simple, compact systems are probably where we're going. Based on everything that I've seen in this report so far, that's really the trend I noticed. Yes, we're not putting as many projectors or screens or big systems in. We're putting in decentralized, centralized systems, if that makes any sense, for this sort of IoT basis, right? So we've got a main hub, but it's going to distribute it to a mesh network, and that's what we're dealing with these days. Although I do have a question, if you don't mind me asking it real quick. So in the report, it says that, the Asia Pacific is the sustained growth. Now, do we know one of two things? My curiosity is, do we know if those integrators that are putting in the systems in those sustained growth are mom and pops or mega corporations? And do we know if they're doing anything different? Like, is there something happening in Asia Pacific that we're not doing in Europe and North America?
That's a great question. And I would say, the bulk of the industry, as we look at even AVIXA membership, is largely made up of the small mom and pops, the single person or 5-man or fewer types of operations. That's probably the bulk of what's going on across these regions and vertical markets. There are certainly different things going on. So one of the things we want to do next is really take a look at that specific question as we look at, say, cinema or live events, et cetera. What kinds of things are integrators doing that is different? What are best practices that you need to keep in mind if you're trying to serve one of these verticals? So stay tuned for more on that story. I'd say this report is more about the trends kind of driving the industry from the top down and across the regions. But we do want to explore that more.
An interesting difference I've observed in the Asia Pacific region, especially now, I'm talking about actually mainland China specifically. This is something I've observed as SDVOE, but also in my day job, selling chips to guys who build streaming video boxes. Whereas in North America, Europe, these parts of the world, we've been undergoing this transition from matrix switches to streaming video. What I've seen from the customers actually selling into the Chinese market is that market's a little newer, and they've been sort of doing streaming the whole time, whether it's H.264 and highly compressed solutions. They've been living with that kind of performance, but enjoying that architecture. And they're now looking to upgrade to better, faster, higher quality streaming solutions. So it's still a transition, but from a different place to high performance streaming place.
Well, here's a question I have about that. Is it more mobile and will still be more mobile centric than we are? Yes, mobile's growing in the European, North American region, but Asia Pacific, like you look at South Korea, has always been mobile centric because of the tight constraints of living, and the network was sort of designed for that. It's a curiosity question. Is it more mobile centric? Will we be seeing more just tablets, or will they grow into that bigger system, more permanent system?
Interesting. That could be a driver. The places I've touched that, like I said, domestic Chinese mainland market, a huge section of that, I guess it makes sense, is surveillance and things. So I'm less talking about the consumer-driven, mobile-driven stuff, which I think may be how they got to a world of lots of H.264. But even on the large-scale government military-style installs, they've taken advantage of those Ethernet technologies for surveillance systems, defense systems, et cetera.
Yeah, one of the themes you're picking up on there that we've been is what we're calling bring your own device, and I'd say that's really been a big factor. I would absolutely agree that Asia Pacific is a big region for that, but even here in the United States, I mean, I think we can all think of our own kind of personal experience of corporations that we work with or for needing to accommodate for bring your own device types of environments, remote employees. Teleworking, all of that is a big driver across our industry, across many industries, for installation, integration, accommodation, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Sean, I appreciate it. Sean Wargo, the Senior Director of Market Intelligence for AVIXA. Thank you, sir. How do people find you guys if they're interested?
You can come certainly to avixa.org, our website. We've got some great information there, the ability to download some of the executive summaries to get a taste of the research. So I'd give that a try.
All right, very good. Sean Wargo from AVIXA. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, our thanks to Sean Wargo from AVIXA. Next up, guys, I was actually turned on to this publication actually while I was at the AVIXA announcement. It's a group called Mondo DR. The website is mondodr.com. Great journalists, great AV folks. They're talking about the article we're using from them is talking about Martin's education program, and not necessarily talking about Martin, but because Martin Audio is doing a webinar program, but not for nothing. This is what Tucker is doing now, right? This is what, not the Martin thing, but for Aurora, this is what you're doing. And it's been fascinating. I've known George for 6 or 7 years now, and it's been fascinating kind of watching him, do this over and over again and teaching folks in the industry. My question to you both is, George, I want to start with you on this. As you're developing these programs, how do you get across the necessity, the importance of education in general, but more specifically, education for AV and bringing up folks who are coming out of the community college or the trade schools and getting them exposed to audio and video and lighting and control in the education format, and then giving them the education and watching them develop themselves?
What you mean from a personal standpoint or from the company standpoint?
Both, actually.
Well, and that's a dichotomy right there. We all know that companies want the best and the brightest, and they want it for the cheapest, and they want to make a lot of money. And that's always been my tact with people. It's like, when your staff knows more, you're going to earn more, and they're going to be worth more. It also means that they're going to be worth more to somebody else, so you better cotton up and pay a fair rate, right? Because we know that the industry is based on very thin margins, and sometimes we find the labor that we can at the margins we can afford, or at least we think we want our profit ratios to be at. It's just a hard reality. But the truth is, you want your guys to be knowledgeable, and you want that opportunity. Because when you're given that information from a company that will give you more than just, here's this product, memorize the specs, then you're on to something. And I think that here is the crux. The Martin thing especially, I think they've got a really good plan for inviting not just their own people, but guest speakers and varied topics and things that not only promote their products, but promote industry knowledge. It's sort of taking on the trade show and industry role to a more personal level, right? So that I think in essence is what's going on here. And that's what really has to be the thread that we teach everyone in this industry. I know that when I'm doing it, and I've been doing the CEDIA training for sort of networking, right?
Yeah.
Everything basic to advanced. And what we've got is a lot of audio and video guys, especially audio guys, wanting to sort of go into that world and get a step ahead. And knowing that part of it has helped a lot of them say, hey, I can ask the right questions. I can sort of develop my knowledge, both hands-on and theory, and eventually advance. I've had guys that have gone through my class that 6 months to a year later, they're writing me saying, hey, I have a question because I just got the job of being the network analysis guy for so-and-so. You know, a lot of it's wireless, which is my sort of love of life and favorite, but they understand that the basic knowledge we got is where we go with advancing our career. So as an industry, we need to be able to teach these guys and beyond just the theory and the basics. And as a company owner, man, you really need to be able to get them excited, intrigued, and let them learn on your time. And it's a bad thing that I'm going to say, but yes, it's not just at home. That happens too. But man, oh man, when there's a webinar by somebody special like in Martin, it's in the mid-afternoon, make an alarm go off on your iPhone and tell them, sit down, there's the Wi-Fi, listen to it for an hour.
Yeah,
it's fine. You know what I mean? So you can tell that's the passion. And when I read this article, I didn't even know about it. I'm like, this is perfect. I like what they're doing there. And this just really does engage an industry. And I'm in awe of it, actually.
All right, Mr. Kennington, Justin has worked for a number of manufacturers. He worked for Google, for crying out loud. From a manufacturer standpoint, how do you get what George was just talking about, right? Because he's not wrong. Integrators look at employees and they're like, you know what? They're costing me. If they're not working, you know, I build these guys out at between 75, 150, $200 an hour. If they're sitting down for an hour watching Justin's webinar, our webinar we did with Justin, for crying out loud, I did just thought of that. They're costing me money. How do you get that across to them that, you know what, watching an SDVOE webinar is going to help them, you know, better? Yes, it's going to help you as an organization, but it's also going to help the integrator.
I mean, there's an element of just sort of being in the right place. I have found for SDVOE, for example, we draw huge crowds to these educational events. Of course, we promote them and we tell you what you're going to get out of it. But here we are at this sort of, you know, cutting edge intersection of AV IT convergence, and those integrators who are going to come listen to the talk and their bosses understand that, you know, I'm an AV guy and I'm intersecting with this IT world more and more. You're not going to be able to bill for $75 or $150 or $10 an hour soon if your guys don't have the knowledge they need to exist in this world where everything we do is on the network. So for me, it's less about how do I promote it, how do I convince them to come, and about how do I make sure that the training that we're giving is completely relevant to the knowledge gaps that are out there in the world. So for me, that means, hey, AV guy, here is what you need to know about how a network works in order to be successful in this world. And on the flip side, more and more IT departments are involved in this stuff. Hey, IT guy, you know everything in the world about multicasting, but what the heck is an EDID and an HDCP? Yeah. And you could do your job a little better if you'd let me teach you about that. So for me, it's about making the content as relevant as possible, as useful as possible in a real way, and then just telling people what you've got. And it turns out they show up in droves.
Oh, very good. All right, last story here. Our friends over at Vaddio, they're coming out with a new matrix switcher, and not for nothing, we use this at Infocom this year. We use this exact AV bridge matrix MIX for our productions in our studio at Infocom this year. The commercial integrator story we're using calls it says that Vaddio is targeting the live event production market. Mr. Tucker, somebody who's spent more than a couple of years in that market, is there room for another matrix bridge, another device that's going to take not just pre-produced content, but also image magnification, the camera shooting the performer and then putting that up on the screen? Is there room for another switcher like that here?
Based on budget, of course.
Okay.
It depends on the scale of the show that you're doing and what its capabilities are. This is pretty impressive. And I also, though, funny, when I read this first, my first thought was not that they called out live production scenarios, but that it was flexible enough to be the corporate tool to do it all. And I think that sort of says a lot about what we were talking about earlier with the AVIXA report, is that a lot of this comes down to multi-hybrid crossovers happening, where at one point we had a teleconferencing system, we had a presentation system, we had an audio system, and they kind of tied into each other, but they were not really melded together. This is sort of an admission that it's all of that. There's soft codecs, there's these freewares, there's a lot going on that this says, look, we can give you the tools to bring all that together, plus give you some better tools to make it really, really professional. And I think that's what's really happening. It's a stab at, yes, you can get all those, but all in one, we've got a box that'll do all of it for you, and it'll do it better. And that, in my opinion, that's really what I'm looking at here. And I think it has a lot to offer. I don't know its MSRP, but it looks like it could do a lot and could be a winner. I like the idea.
I'll get you a special price today, George.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll have to call Minnesota, which is where Vaddio is headquartered.
Yeah.
Justin, we've talked about the network a lot on this episode specifically, and especially and over the last couple of years in general. This is a piece of hardware, right? Cisco last week or week before last, in their corporate announcement, said that they were moving away from hardware. George mentioned the soft codecs. Is this just a stepping stone until we get into the software centric world of video and transport and everything?
You've hit on it exactly, even including the Cisco point I was going to bring up from your show last week or so, that they're transitioning into more software centric. What we're looking at in that is really the next major driving trend for the whole industry. At this point, I think we've been through the matrix switch to AV over IP conversation. That whole transition is not finished by any means. But we all know where that's headed, and now it's just a matter of execution. The next big thing is to move into this complete world where it's really software that is our application, that defines our applications. So here it means, this thing has 6 different soft codecs in it, right? Because that's what matters. Do I want to hook up to Google Hangouts or Skype for Business or WebEx or what? Maybe I want to do one and George wants to do another. Mm-hmm. And the Vaddio manufacturing this box, and others who manufacture boxes like it recognize that that's the kind of flexibility that matters. Of course, there's always a place for hardware. At the end of the day, no matter how great my software is, somewhere some electrons have to wiggle.
Well, and that was actually going to be my next question is where does that, I guess I'll ask it this way. Do you see a world where there's no hardware? And understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there's no source and there's no destination, but I'm saying all the squishy stuff in the middle that right now folks are buying 8x8 matrices or boxes like this, where there's not that middle piece. There's a laptop somewhere or a cell phone. We talked about BYOD, or a tablet that auto-magically gets to the display.
I would the way I would look at it is a little different than that. The line I would try and draw is between, what do I want to call it? Let's say the endpoint device and the infrastructure.
Okay.
And the big trend, look at a mobile device, right? Look at an iPhone or an Android, latest and greatest, right? The endpoint device is that little thing in your hand. And yet more and more, a huge fraction of the real sort of magic that's going on when you talk to Siri or hire an Uber or whatever, the real heavy lifting is all going on in the cloud, in the infrastructure, not in your device. Your device is a screen, a little CPU that can move some graphics around, and a Wi-Fi connection. And so I think what we'll see then, that trend is way ahead of us in telecom on the iPhones and things. We will see that trend over the years in AV as more and more the heavy lifting does go to the infrastructure where there is real hardware. There's Cisco switches and there's big Ethernet networks and intelligence built into that network. But the endpoint, the definition of the endpoint device starts to shrink down until it is whatever that device is in your hand, your work laptop, your iPhone, the touch panel or voice interface in the room, whatever it is. We're gonna shrink what happens in the endpoint and grow what happens in the infrastructure.
All right, very good. That'll do it for this show. Real quickly, not that this wasn't important news, but both Diversified this week picked up another company called MCW, and AVISBL picked up Sharps. They moved into Canada, which was a big deal. So both of those companies
just in time for the nice weather.
The big getting bigger. So yeah, Justin's up in Montreal, so he can welcome them with his sub, what was it, 20 degrees last winter?
Oh God, I don't even remember. I've seen temperatures here that I didn't know actually existed,
except on a Kelvin scale. All right, Mr. Kennington, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
How do people get a hold of you or SDVOE or anything?
Check us out at sdvoe.org and at SDVOE on Twitter.
All right, very good. Mr. Tucker.
Yeah.
Don't make it so long next time. Thank you, sir.
Yes, I know. Well, I've been busy. So
whatever.
You can find me on social. I'm at Tucker2s or Aurora MM on Twitter, AuroraMM.com for Aurora's website as well.
He hosted the show like 2 weeks ago. Where were you, Tim?
I know.
I was at Cedia.
Okay.
With you.
Well,
it's a remote world. He doesn't know.
I was with Kennington 2 weeks. Oh my God. All right. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me because at this point I have given up on the Chicago Bears and I'm watching hockey. So go Blues. But go by the website if you would please, AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others. We have a weekly one that looks at the residential market hosted by Matt Scott. It's called AVWeek. We also have a number of monthlies. Also check out our underwriter section. These are the folks that are kind enough to support us financially and help us do what we do. SDVOE is one of them, so we thank them. Helping us do things like go to New York Digital Signage Week and cover that, which we'll be doing the week of October 30th. So if you're around New York or around, I guess I should say technically Times Square because New York is kind of big, come by and say hi. We're doing 3 shows there that week. So all of that and more at avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been AV Week.